Welcome, dear dreamers, to the Dreamy Tales Universe. Here, the stars still whisper, and the myths of old rise like smoke from a quiet fire. Tonight, we follow not the thunder of kings or the rise of mountain thrones, but the quiet steps of one who chose compassion over obedience. This is the story of Prometheus, the titan who dared to give fire to mortals, and in doing so, lit the world with more than flame. So breathe deeply. Let your body soften. And let us begin. Before the flame, the world was quiet. Not in peace, but in absence. The earth had shape. The trees had leaves. The rivers sang soft songs down their paths. But the mortals, they shivered. Born from clay and breath, they wandered the forests with wide eyes and cold hands. They built no homes. They cooked no food. They lit no lights, for they had no fire. The gods on Mount Olympus watched them from above. Some laughed. Some ignored. Some simply did not see. But Prometheus saw. He was not like the others. He was a titan, older than the Olympians, but spared after the war. Allowed to remain as long as he obeyed. But Prometheus did not seek a throne. He did not hunger for power. He watched the mortals below with something the other gods had forgotten: pity, and, perhaps, love. He saw the way they wrapped themselves in leaves, the way they curled beside stones for warmth, the way their eyes lit up not with fire, but with hope. He saw their hands, capable, clever, but empty. And in his heart, he knew they deserved more. But fire was forbidden. Zeus, high on his throne, had kept the secret of flame locked away. Fire was for the gods alone, not for fragile, fleeting humans. They will grow too bold, he had said. They will forget who rules the sky. But Prometheus, he did not see boldness as a curse. He saw it as a spark that, if fed, might one day glow bright enough to light the world. So he made a choice. One night, when Olympus was quiet, and the moon hung low like a silver eye, Prometheus left the halls of the gods. He walked to the edge of heaven, where the stars burned closest. And from the tip of one, he stole a flame. Not a roaring fire, but a single thread of light, twisting and golden. He cradled it in a stalk of fennel, a hollow reed that could carry heat without burning. And with careful hands, he carried it down to the cold world below. The first mortal to see him was a child, curled in the crook of a tree, trembling from the wind. She looked up and saw him not as a god, not as a titan, but as a stranger holding a strange light. He knelt beside her, smiled softly, and touched the flame to a fallen branch. It flickered, then caught. And for the first time, the night glowed. The fire spread, not as destruction, but as comfort. mortals gathered. They stared. They reached out their hands and felt warmth. Not from the sun, but from something they could hold and tend and make their own. The fire gave them light to see by, heat to cook with, protection from the beasts of the night. It gave them power. But more than that, it gave them choice. And choice, as the gods well knew, is a dangerous thing. On Olympus, Zeus felt it. A flicker in the air. A ripple in the wind. He looked down and saw the fires blooming. Not wild, not violent, but steady. He knew at once who had given it. Prometheus, he said, his voice cold. For to give mortals fire was to give them freedom. And freedom meant change. The fire had been given. And in its quiet warmth, the world below began to change. Mortals no longer huddled in fear when night fell. They built hearths, lit torches, and gathered together in circles of flickering light. They began to cook, to shape tools, to see beyond survival. And all around the earth, new things took root: hope, story, imagination. The fire was not just heat. It was memory, and dreams, and promise. And though Prometheus did not walk among them openly, his gift lingered in every campfire, every candle, every spark struck in the dark. But above, on the high slopes of Olympus, the silence had broken. Zeus had seen the fire. He had watched its glow spread like slow lightning from one village to the next. He had seen the mortals smile, laugh, create. And he had seen them look up at the sky. Not in fear, but in wonder. It was that look that chilled him. Not the fire. Not even the disobedience. But the look in their eyes, the glint of a question. A flicker of why not us? And Zeus, ruler of the heavens, lord of thunder, could not allow that flame to grow unchecked. He summoned the gods to his golden hall. The clouds thickened at his call, and the winds curled tightly around Olympus, waiting. Prometheus, he said, his voice like distant thunder, has given the mortals what was not his to give. Some gods nodded. Some hesitated. Others looked to the ground. Zeus did not ask for their thoughts, only their obedience. For this betrayal, he said, there must be punishment. Not just for the Titan, but for the ones he gave it to. The punishment for Prometheus would come later. But first, Zeus turned his gaze downward, toward the mortals warming themselves beside the stolen flame. They had done nothing wrong. Not really. But they had accepted a gift meant only for the gods. And so, Zeus whispered to the fates. He called upon Hephaestus, god of fire and forge, and gave him secret instructions. Something was being shaped. Not a weapon. Not a curse. But a lesson. And while the fires below still crackled, while mortals danced for the first time beneath glowing light, something new was born in the halls of Olympus. But that part of the story belongs to another night. As for Prometheus, he stood alone at the edge of the world, far from Olympus, far from the mortals he had helped. The fennel stalk that once held the flame now lay empty in his hand, burnt, but sacred. He looked down and saw the smoke rising gently into the sky. He watched the mortals feeding their fires, keeping them alive as if they understood how precious it was. He smiled, softly, not in pride, but in peace. He had broken a rule. He had angered a king. He had defied the sky itself. But he had given warmth to those who had none. And in his heart, he knew it had been right. The stars blinked above him. The wind moved through the trees, carrying the scent of ash and change. Prometheus did not run. He did not hide. He simply waited. He knew what came next. Zeus would not let this pass. The gods would not forget. But still, he waited. Because sometimes, to give is to lose. But to lose for the right reason is to become something more. The fire had been revealed. The secret was out. And the world would never be the same. Prometheus had given them fire. And now, he waited. High on a windswept cliff, where even the clouds seemed to hesitate, he stood alone. The world below glowed softly with tiny flickers of flame, 1,000 hearths, 1,000 lights, born from one small gift. The gods above, however, glowed with something else. Not warmth, but fury. Zeus had seen enough. The mortals were changing. They were building, singing, learning. And they were looking up, not with fear, but with longing. That was what frightened him most. So he summoned his strongest forces. He sent word through Olympus, through storm cloud and wind, and called for Prometheus to answer. But Prometheus did not return. He did not bow. He simply remained still. Not with pride, but with peace. He had made his choice. And so, Zeus made his. The gods did not come with torches. They came with silence. It was Hephaestus, god of fire and forge, who came to carry out the sentence. He did not come with joy. He came with sorrow and the weight of duty. He looked into Prometheus's eyes, and Prometheus nodded, as if to say, "I know." Together, they climbed to the highest peak of the world, far above Olympus, where the wind howled and the stars burned cold. A place no mortal would ever reach. There, Hephaestus raised his hammer. And he forged chains from unbreakable metal, pulled from the core of the earth. They did not shine. They did not rattle. They were quiet. Final. He wrapped them gently around Prometheus's wrists, his ankles, his chest. He fastened them to the face of the mountain, where the wind would never rest. And there, Prometheus was bound. He did not scream. He did not fight. He simply looked out over the world below, at the tiny fires, at the flickers of change, and he smiled. Zeus watched from Olympus. He said nothing. But his punishment was not finished. He sent one final piece. A creature, terrible and perfect, with wings sharp as glass and eyes like burning coal. An eagle. It circled the mountain and descended with slow, steady hunger. Each day, it came to Prometheus. Each day, it tore at his side. Each day, his pain returned, only to heal again by night. Immortal. Enduring. Bound, but never broken. The gods believed this would be enough. That suffering would smother the spark. That time would tame the rebel flame. But they did not understand. Prometheus was not made of fire. He was made of hope, of stillness, of choice. And in his chains, he became something the gods had never faced. An idea. A whisper carried by the wind, telling mortals to wonder, to reach, to question. To believe that gifts, even when costly, can change the world. The days passed. The eagle came. The wind howled. The pain returned. And still, Prometheus watched the fires below. Faint dots of orange glowing like stars fallen to earth. He did not call out. He did not beg. Because he knew, one day, a new fire would come. Not from heaven. Not from stars. But from hearts that remembered his name. And somewhere, in the quiet of a village, a child placed another log on the fire. She looked into the flame and thought of nothing in particular. Only warmth. Only wonder. She didn't know his name. But the warmth she felt came from him. And far above, bound to the mountain, Prometheus closed his eyes. And smiled. The eagle still came. Each day. Wings slicing through the sky, eyes fixed on the mountain. And Prometheus, still bound to the stone, endured. He felt the pain. He felt the wind. But deeper than either, he felt the warmth rising from the world below. A warmth he had given. In valleys and forests, in caves and fields, the mortals had kept the fire alive. They had learned to shape it, to feed it, to pass it down. But more than that, they had learned to listen. Because fire, when it dances, tells stories. And in every story, there is memory. Around the firelight, they began to gather at night. Not just for warmth. Not just for food. But for words. They told tales of how the world was made. Of gods and stars. of thunder and sea. And always, in hushed tones, they told the tale of the one who gave them flame. Sometimes he was a titan, sometimes a spirit, sometimes just a whisper in the wind. But the story always ended the same. He gave us fire. And for that, he was bound. And then they would sit in silence, watching the fire flicker, as if his soul danced in every spark. They did not know his name. Not all of them. But they remembered his gift. Fire lit more than homes. It lit minds. With it came tools, and music, and drawing, simple shapes on stone walls, echoes of dreams scratched into time. They learned to carve, to write, to remember. Villages became towns. Paths became roads. They were still small, still fragile, but they no longer wandered in the cold. And every leap forward had begun with a flame, with a choice, a kindness, a quiet defiance. On the mountain, Prometheus watched. He could not move. He could not speak. But he could still feel. He felt their joy as fire sparked for the first time in a child's hands. He felt their sorrow as embers cooled in winter. He felt their strength as they learned to build, not just homes, but ideas. He felt them grow. And in those quiet, lonely nights between eagle and sky, he rested in that feeling. Because some chains, no matter how heavy, could not reach the soul. The gods. They saw it too. At first, they turned away. Let Zeus rage. Let time pass. But even they could not ignore the glow spreading across the earth. The fire had not faded. It had spread. It was no longer Prometheus's alone. It had become part of the world. And with it, a new kind of power had taken root. Not the power of storms, or oceans, or death, but the power to create, to wonder, to change. Zeus watched from his high throne, clouds curling around his brow. He saw temples being built, not just for him, but for thought. He saw questions he had not asked, dreams he had not dreamed. And in a rare, quiet moment, he wondered, was the fire a theft? Or a gift even he had not yet understood? But he said nothing. Not yet. Because gods, like mortals, sometimes need time to learn. Below, a child crouched near a hearth, holding a stick to the flame, watching it blacken. She didn't know of titans, or gods, or chains. She only knew the fire warmed her fingers, lit her mother's face, and let her draw stars in the dirt. And when she looked into the flame, just before sleep, she whispered, "Thank you." No one heard. Except the wind. And the sky. And a titan on a faraway mountain who, for a moment, felt lighter. The world had changed. Not because of a battle. not because of a throne, but because of one silent choice, made in compassion, held in courage, and passed down like a story told by firelight. And still, they remembered. Even if they didn't know why. Even if they didn't know his name. They remembered. The fire still burned. Not wildly. Not loudly. But steadily. From village hearths to mountain caves, from flickering torches to tiny lamps beside sleeping children. The flame remained. Not because it was protected, but because it had been shared. Prometheus, still bound high above the world, watched with eyes that never closed. He could not speak, but the world spoke for him. In every warm home, in every hand that held a tool, in every story passed beside the coals. And though he did not walk the earth, his gift did. The fire had become more than warmth, more than light. It had become possibility. With fire, the mortals cooked. They healed. They gathered. But more than that, they began to dream. They built. Not just homes, but thoughts. They wrote songs. Painted on stone. Mapped the stars. The fire had given them more than survival. It had given them time. And with time came questions. With questions came wonder. And with wonder came stories. The story of Prometheus spread. Some said he stole the flame. Others said he gave it freely. Some cursed him. Others praised. But no matter the version, one thing was always true. He had given something he could not take back. And the world was warmer for it. Not just in heat, but in heart. Even the gods, from their golden thrones, began to change. They watched humanity rise from shadows to sunrise. They saw temples not built in fear, but in admiration. Zeus, who once saw fire as a threat, now saw it in a softer light. He saw it in a child's invention, in a healer's firelit touch, in the laughter of families beneath glowing lanterns. And in the quiet of Olympus, he wondered if Prometheus had known this all along. Still, the chains remained. Still, the eagle came. Still, the pain returned. But Prometheus, he did not regret, because his flame had spread too far to be undone. His gift was no longer his. It belonged to the world. And that, in the deepest part of him, was enough. The stars wheeled slowly above. The world turned. Generations passed. And still, the fire was kept. By poets, by mothers, by travelers and teachers and dreamers. They lit candles on stormy nights. They told stories around bonfires. They passed the spark forward without always knowing where it came from. But in the glow, something ancient lingered. A whisper. A presence. A promise. Prometheus was not forgotten. Even if his name was lost, his gift lived on. In science, in art, in memory, and most of all, in the courage to care, to give, to help, even when it costs something. Because the truest fires burn quiet and last longest. So if you ever find yourself staring into a flame, watch the way it dances. And know, somewhere beyond the clouds, there is a bound figure watching too. And smiling. Because the gift he gave was never just fire. It was hope. It was imagination. It was a spark that still lives in you. And so, dear dreamer, the fire burns on. Not in the mountain, but in the quiet moments of our world, in the warmth of a home, in the glow of a story, in the courage to give even when no one sees. This tale is rooted in the ancient myths of Greece, a story older than memory, but still flickering in hearts today. Thank you for resting here with me, in the Dreamy Tales universe. If this story warmed your night, please like, subscribe, and share where in the world you're listening from. It helps this light travel farther. Next time, we open a box never meant to be opened. And follow the tale of Pandora. Until then, sleep well, dream deep, and keep the fire glowing.